Hello, it's Lotus. Thanks for being here. Thanks for joining me. Today we are talking more about relationships and relational intimacy. For more on just ascension and our awakening journey, you can find more of that general information over on my Patreon page, and I will leave a link below. We're still doing some of that here, but most of this right now anyway is focused on the ascension path of sacred union and divine union. All right, so that being said, let's go ahead and jump in. So today might feel a little counter. Maybe some of this feels a little counter the relational intimacy piece or relationship piece. Because when we're talking about these next levels and phases and stages of our development and maturity, there is a wide gap where the relationship becomes more between us and us, right? Me and me, you and you, and us or me and the divine, and not always as much focused within that time frame on relationships in partnerships. Now, karmic, as we know, the karmic relationships are very focused on relationship, very focused on the earlier stages of healing. Moving into conscious relationships, we're moving more into that phase of wholeness and operating from just more developmental stages of awareness and skills and tools in navigating relationship. As we begin to move towards sacred union and into divine union, the focus starts to shift, not in all cases, but in general, on a deeper level of commitment and devotion to our wholeness in sovereignty. So I might touch back on this, but I want to just let you know as we go through this that this isn't necessarily about individuation as much as it might feel like and seem as we talk about this topic today in particular. So what we're going to talk about today is that idea and that desire and that need and that beautiful opportunity, right, of being chosen as the beloved to our chosen person. And yet before we get to being chosen, we're going to talk a little bit about being in our own life, developing ourselves in our own life. So one of the things that the twin flame template teaches us is that when we are working within the realms of inner union, right, the inner alchemy, this is the phase and stage along the journey of divine union, all right? So, so when we're in that inner phase, we're developing a deeper connection with our person. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that person has to be in our life, in the physical form. Or if we know for the twin flame template, when we have that true twin flame template, we know who our person is. We feel them, we sense them, they feel us, they sense us. And that comes and goes, it ebbs and flows, but there's always a tandem that is governed by the divine in the mutual healing and evolution and going through these phases and stages. Once we have hit that place where we are devoted to self, right? Because we aren't waiting to be chosen by our person, by our counterpart, because we already have been chosen on a deep soul level. And once we connect to that within us, we come more into our wholeness. And that begins to circumvent the lower chakra unresolved abandonment needs, rejection, fear of being alone, right? Fear of missing out, so to speak. And we don't actually need that counterpart in the physical through this phase and stage in the old way of needing. So I have another video that you can check at that is, I think it's karmic need, holy need. They're two different octaves of our own frequency. So in this realm, in this phase, one of the easiest ways to put it is that we're not just living celibately, but we are choosing, even though we might have our person there, right? So in more of the maybe conscious or karmic relational stages, we might know, or we really have like our ideal person, right? That we are in love with, that we're holding out for. We have an image, we have an idea of what that ideal relationship would be. But we're still in the dating field, right? We're still seeing other people, maybe we're having other relationships, and we get to learn from those relationships. And yet, what we get to learn in the twin flame template, we're going to circle around here, is that we choose not to date, right? We have done these up levelings. We have done this deeper homecoming and inner alignment. We have reached those phases and stages of devotion to ourself and to our person and to the divine. And so the needs that usually compel us into settling for something that isn't really true for us, or filling the time until that right one comes along, or or having a really hard time just being alone. That's a very different kind of need. So the holy need is when we have become full. We have become into whatever level of sovereignty we're meant to be in before our divine counterpart comes along. Returns, most is the way that I'll put that. And that need is more of a heart-soul desire of celebration of everything we already have. Now, I'm not saying that having needs or being lonely or having, that want for another person in our life. I want to say that that's really very normal for our humanness. Our humanness, we could say, are very relational. We're pack animals, right? We work best in phases and stages of our development, in community, in connection. That being said, the other end of that spectrum of the benefits and the value and the importance of finding individuation and deepening in oneself is as equal importance, because then comes the marriage between those two polarities. So in the twin flame journey, we learn to sort of, we might have wants, I'm certainly not, connected with my divine counterpart in the physical world at this time. And so it doesn't mean that I don't have, I don't look forward to that happening, or I don't have a yearning for that on the human level, but I'm aware that when I can drop in, when I open up, it's right there. And it never leaves me. And I can only hope that he experiences the same, right? I don't know that for sure. So when we're dating, when we're in karmic or even conscious relationships, we're healing dynamics that need healing, right? So it's all, nothing is wrong or imperfect. They're all right and true for their phases and stages. But there is a level where we pull our energy in and we are not seeking anymore. And once we hit the octaves where our signature frequency is really activated, where we know what our true inner song is, what usually happens is there isn't a lot of attraction to other people. Physical, chemical attraction in the earlier stages and even middle stages of this journey, they're pulled together through karma. They're pulled together through those polarities that are going to trigger the opportunities for our healing. Once most of that has taken place, and I'm not going to say all of it, we navigate it very differently, and there becomes very few and far between other people that there is an attraction, that there is chemistry with. And, I can say for myself, since my marriage, so in the last 22 years, right, and we've been divorced for a few years, but since my marriage, there's only been 2 people, right, that I've ever really experienced that attraction to. And my divine counterpart, it's a deep attraction, but it is a soul attraction. It is a bond. It is deep peace. It is deep home. It is, it is that which is just more expansive for who I already am. So it's a very different experience. And the frequencies of the attractions that I've had have been clear that, oh, I see what's in this attraction. I see some residual things that why I'm attracted, what could bubble up, right? What there could be here that could feel sort of enticing and exciting, passionate, or maybe even just physically based. But by those times, I've already established a very different frequency. And so it was easy to see. So when we hit these higher octaves, we're looking for something very different than in the earlier octaves. And we're compelled and propelled by very different, let's say, needs. There's the holy need and there is that personhood need. Both have their purpose and place. So I want to look at the being chosen. So early on, probably in 2018, when I first started on this leg of my journey, I was shown by my guides and taught about the loneliness program. That, and this goes into a much deeper topic that I don't usually talk about, but I'm going to just touch on it here. As humanity on this planet, we have gone through thousands and thousands of years of many, many different, let's say, ways of experimenting being human. And we haven't gone through this journey alone, right? We have other forces, let's just say, that have been a part of life on planet Earth. And so one of the programs, right, if we're operating in the 3D matrix, then we're riddled with programs and conditioning that keep our consciousness relegated to what serves that level of consciousness, which is now imploding and exploding and crumbling because now we're busting out and, all over the place. Humanity is rising in mass to new levels of consciousness. And there was a specific program that piggybacked on separation. So we've talked about separation before, that, first we separate from divine source into polarity, from unity into duality, and then we separate again from the mother when we're birthed, and then we start coming into relationship, and then when those relationships end, for whatever reason, we go through separation again. So there is that part of us that feels alone on a very deep level because of the phases and stages of separation. Now, those have been amplified by programs that fuel our loneliness. There's a very big difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness is a deep emptiness and yearning and ache. It can be very painful. It has that flavor of deep abandonment and deep yearning that is open to pretty much anything and anyone, because it just needs that hole within us. It's like that donut hole, right? That sense of self to be filled. And the loneliness program, the more that we feed into it without recognizing that, again, there is a difference between loneliness and being alone. And the loneliness program erodes away at our self-worth, at our sense of self, at our ability to be able to self-source. It erodes away at our ability to hold ourselves and to operate from deep levels of, soul truth, higher truth, integrity. And it feeds the programs of promiscuity. It feeds the programs of pornography. It feeds the programs of settling for relationships that aren't healthy or that are destructive to us. It feeds the programs of thinking there's something wrong with us, our self-worth. So the loneliness program, when we're operating from that deep level of lack, we're constantly moving outside of ourselves to fill it. And we fill it only temporarily, right? It's like feeding a hunger that can only be satiated by, junk food, let's say. Because the true food is what the twin soul journey really teaches us. Now, there are many schools and paths of self-development that work with self-love, that bring healing to this loneliness. Yet the twin flame / twin soul, divine counterpart journeys take it even higher, because the only thing that truly is going to satisfy that depth of ourselves and heal loneliness is Source, is our connection to the divine. And as I say every time, that's very different for everyone. That can be when you're out in nature and you know everything is okay. You know you have everything that you need. You know that you're connected and a part of something so much bigger, and you land in deep peace. That is a communication and a frequency of divine source, of life. When you connect to the Mother, the Father, God, that wholeness from all the realms, right? That when you know that life's got you, the universe has you, that's very different than needing to go outside to get ourself filled. But the remedy is not only Source, it is self-love. And it is learning how to self-source, self-soothe. It is learning how to heal the abandonment, the rejection, the fears of being alone, the separation, not by looking for the next person, but by actually diving within and accessing sovereignty, accessing your soul connection, your devotion to you, so that you reclaim your wholeness, so that you aren't subject to that distortion program that does compel the opposite, that compels outward motion versus inward connection and wholeness and power. Power from your own presence. Now, I felt like there was something I was going to say really quick there. Oh, yeah, that's what I was going to say. So my guess is most of us know what it's like to be in a relationship that really we know is not the right fit. Really we know that, let go of these higher octaves, just come down to like more of our deep personal development, where we know that we could go on, but it just really isn't fulfilling, right? We feel lonely in the relationship. We feel unmet, we feel unseen, we feel unacknowledged, we feel a lack of being able to really express who we truly are. And it isn't anybody's fault, it's simply the dynamics and energetics, and the frequencies carry distortion, so it creates this inability. If we have resistance to true connection and deep intimacy. First, we need to develop that with ourselves before we can really develop it with another person. We're going to feel more lonely in relationship on deep levels. I don't mean like, our society teaches us just to keep busy and be occupied and be a workaholic, or, be a shopaholic, or whatever that is, right? So that we don't really have to recognize the deep lack that we're living in. And so I bring that up because I certainly have felt that. Like I got to the point, I don't remember, probably in my 30s, where I knew that I would rather be alone than be in a relationship and feel lonely. And because I had already started kind of really making these choices to choose me, to not choose my own dysfunctional behavior anymore, to not choose other people's dysfunctional behavior in my life. So to heal those really dense levels of my own karmic journey. And as I progressed, right, I became less and less lonely in general, and then really love my alone time and really value my alone time. And goodness knows, on this leg of my journey, I have had, I've had years now of alone time, and choosing that, because I'm not settling for anything less than what I know is my frequency match. Now, is our divine counterpart our only frequency match on this twin flame journey? My guess is no. My guess is that that is the highest configuration of geometry and coding. That is the right fit. And what comes through that fit is both counterparts' next levels of learning that need to have that divine click. And yet, I also understand that not every divine counterpart are going to come into that sacred union, right? Not every relationship will necessarily do that. Well, hello. I don't know if you guys heard that. And yet, there are higher octave configurations that will be right and true, and, the divine will orchestrate that. There will be the knowing. I have no doubt in my mind about either of those. Now, there are some people whose path of inner union and divine union is strictly a 100% sovereign journey unto themselves, right? That's part of their blueprint. They move through all of these phases and stages through their own relationship with the divine, right? We could say sort of like a monastic path. So we have that in Ascension too. And then there are those who follow this path of twin soul. And as I've shared before, one of the most famous and most beautiful and most well-known archetypes of this path is Jesus and Mary Magdalene. And if you aren't familiar with that union in that way, you can find it in the Gospel of Philip. You can find it in the Gospel of Thomas. You can find it in many of the Gnostic teachings, not the canonical Gospels, but the Gnostic teachings. So We have a template. We've had a model. We've had a few models that have walked us, that have walked before us. And so what we do when we're on this journey is, so to speak, is we empty out our chalice. You know, as the divine feminine or the sacred feminine, we empty out our heart and our womb space of any other partners who have come before. And the masculine goes through his clearing as well of any past karmic partners in his heart space and within that hara center, but it's a little bit different, but that's just like that second chakra that I'm kind of taking us into like a whole other area. But I'll just finish it, right? The womb space of the feminine receives, right? So we take in energy very differently. The masculine energy goes out. And so it's very important for the feminine, I'm going to say even more so, because everything I'm talking about here can feel very counter to the feminine. A masculine is very used to kind of operating in that contained, individualistic way. You know, not as communicative. Their emotional makeup is a little bit different. I'm saying this in general. Everybody's going to have their own elemental balance. They do fine on their own most of the time for longer periods of time. However, the feminine, right, connects more relationally. So for the feminine, it's about building more bonds with women, right? With the divine, with self-nurturing on very deep levels, with learning how to self-love, self-soothe, self-care, so that we can be operating from our highest place, where our relational coding can be met in higher octaves, and we can clear and cleanse out the past. So that's all I'm going to say on that. So let's just sum this up, because I feel like I went in a couple different directions. In the higher octaves of our operating, as we continue to move through these phases and stages and spiritual sovereignty and maturity, we are in preparation to do everything that we can for ourselves, to prepare ourselves for the divine. Masculines, feminines. And we are already chosen by us. Our divine counterpart, when there's this coding, when there is this blueprint, already knows, right? And is choosing on a soul level once you've gotten on this path and once you've gone through the early developmental stages. And lastly, we utilize this template even if we don't carry the twin template to continue to usher in the higher frequency sacred unions through doing the same kind of inner work. We utilize the same methods, the same ways of coming into wholeness, the same healing, the same practices, the same integrity, the same consciousness. All right, so I hope this gives a whole other perspective of what we're doing, right? So where are you in your phases and stages, right? We're all in different places, but this again is the visioning of where we're going for this whole new earth. amazingness that is unfolding through the collapse, and but through the sacredness and the strengthening of our own soul presencing. All right. So you can check out any links below for any other assistance, or to join on Patreon. Many blessings. Much love.